Hello and welcome to 1 Year to Census Day. This is an idea exchange webinar. My name is Kevin Priestley. I am an assistant planner at DRCOG, and I just wanted to welcome everybody. I'm really excited for the panel that we have with us today. It's going to be a fabulous panel, and there's going to be a lot of stuff for you to take away. Before I get into those presentations, however, I just have a few announcements to go through. This is what the agenda looks like for today. In your handout pane, you can download a copy of this presentation. There will be a couple links that you can click on to interact with from our announcements. And there are some materials from the Census Bureau for you to get involved with if you would like to get involved in efforts locally and understand a little bit more about what Lily will talk about. After those announcements, we'll go directly into our presentations, and then we'll have about 30 minutes left over at the end for question and answers. And I'll talk about how we want questions submitted in just a second here. So the first thing that I have is that DRCOG is looking for amendments. There's public comments for MetroVision amendments. The public comment period closes on April 17th. On that date at 6:30 p.m., we will be hosting a public hearing just prior to our DRCOG board meeting. That'll be at our offices in downtown Denver at 1001 17th Street on the first floor, rather. The next announcement is that on April 23rd, we will be having our annual Bike to Work Day open house. Bike to Work Day is just around the corner on Wednesday, June 26th. So just please stop by anytime between 7:30 a.m. and 10 a.m. on the 23rd. We just ask that if you are interested, you RSVP so that we know how many people to prepare for. Our next in-person event in the Idea Exchange and Imagine a Great Region series will be on May 8th. In 2019, DRCOG and City Center at the University of Colorado, Denver have partnered together to better align planning practice and research in efforts to imagine a great region. Our next Idea Exchange event will be held on May 8th from 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. at the Lawrence Street Center at CU Denver. The event will feature speakers and researchers who will discuss new models to understand how people, place, and policy shape neighborhood change and interventions designed to discourage displacement in an era of regional growth. More information about the event will be available in the coming weeks, so please use these links to get more information about the event series. If you would like to receive email updates, please download this PowerPoint slide deck and click on that link at the very bottom, and it will send an email to me, and I can put you on our list for that. So our last announcement from DRCOG and related to the census is that we are currently working with Golden on census tract boundary adjustments. If you'd like to learn more and provide feedback, we have both an in-person meeting, and it will also be available on the webinar. So you'll be able to follow that link to RSVP. In person will be at our offices. Basically what's going on is that DRCOG is participating in the Participant Statistical Areas program on behalf of stakeholders in our region. We have a plan that involves a number of tract splits, and Golden's plan will actually involve some tract renumbering, which has some effects, particularly for the data folks. So please, if you're interested in the PSAP process and want to know more, join in on that webinar. And that'll be on May 6th from 2 to 3 p.m. Finally, we do have AICP credits approved for this event. So if you are an AICP member, American Institute of Certified Planners, that number is 917-4527, and you can add that to your CM tracker through the American Planning Association. Finally, we are going to ask that you submit questions early and often during the event today. So if you have any questions that come up while presenters are going through and talking about their work, please submit questions using the question box in the GoToWebinar panel. Like I said, you can do that at any time. You're going to be muted throughout the event, so that's going to be the only way that we are taking questions today. In addition, we're going to be using GoToWebinar's polling feature a couple of times, hopefully to allow for a little bit more interactivity, figure out some issues that you might be having locally, and we can share this information with our panelists here today and hopefully help them target outreach throughout the state. And so with that, I do have our first poll for the day, and we are just interested in the number of people that you are attending the event with. Just to track, we had about 80 people, 80, 90 people register, so we just want to see how many people you're with. And it helps you understand how the polling feature works. Still waiting for a couple more votes, it seems like. So generally, it looks like people are watching by themselves with maybe a couple people in small groups. We just like to know that. And it's also important for you, if you're registering with AICP credits for monitoring purposes. And so with that, we can move along to our first presentation for today. And that will be with Lily Griego. So Lily is a partnership coordinator with the U.S. Census Bureau based in Denver. She specializes in strategic project management, stakeholder engagement, political outreach and advocacy, project management, strategic communications, and campaign management. She has experience in zoning law, education and enforcement, floodplain management, water, air, and land conservation, stormwater management, and outreach and enforcement in local government. Lily has a bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Colorado, Denver, local. And with that, I will turn it over to Lily.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the introduction, Kevin. Glad I had my LinkedIn up to date. So thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone on the call. We want to extend an special. There was a typo out verbally. This special thank you to our host, Dr. Cogg, for pulling this all together, all of the attendees on the call. So we do have some time for question and answer at the end, as Kevin mentioned. So I am going to put a timer on for myself because I think it's important to get through all of our slides and turn this over. We can really have a great conversation through our Q&A session. So as stated, my name is Lily. I have colleagues in the room today that work statewide and in specific areas of the state of Colorado working on the 2020 census. So let's get started. What you're seeing on our screen was rolled out in the last couple of weeks. This is our 2020 census logo and tagline. And so you'll find this throughout some of our websites and information that you're going to start to see. So we're really excited about Shape Your Future. And you'll see this as we continue to move through the different slides. My contact information will also be at the end of the presentation, so we'll just move right along. We start off most of our presentations and say, why do we do a census? Why do we do a decennial census every 10 years? And I love this question, especially in training environments, because people have different ideas that pop into their heads first. And so the first one that we want to cover today is that this is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. Constitutionally mandated. We don't get to say that too frequently in a lot of our civic participation. So I think it's really exciting to play a direct role in our democracy, especially when it's talking about the Constitution. So this is a great opportunity to engage in a conversation about that. However, it's not the only reason we engage in the census every 10 years. So you're going to hear all of our presenters talk about this. So just to stay on point, this also determines apportionment. Apportionment is a really fancy way of saying how many members of Congress do we have. So we have 435 members of Congress, and the decennial census determines how many are in each state. Therefore, if one state has a loss of population and loses a congressional seat, another seat is moved to another state. So that's how we determine apportionment or reapportionment. Census also provides for a distribution of more than $675 billion in federal funding. You will hear a variation of numbers today and over the course of the next year. We operate with the 675 federal dollars in our talking points. So we're looking forward to having conversations about what does that look like for Colorado specifically. Also, the census provides data essential for redistricting, which is the next process after we finish the census. So our team in Colorado is specifically working on the decennial census. We actually do have a training for our partnership specialists, and we do not engage in deep dive conversations related to redistricting. We are hard focused on an accurate count for Colorado. So I've had some bullet points just to make this really easy to navigate. Why should everyone be counted in Colorado? Why is it important? Because it's the law, it's safe, and it's easy. However, just selling those 3 points is not as easy as one would think. So let's walk through just a couple of things here. It is a process of our democracy that builds equity and access to funding. And I think that that's a really important point to drive home. When we have communities, if you think about different demographics throughout the entire state, you can see massive building, and you walk through some brand new apartment buildings, and you can see lavish, upgraded, amenities for people who live here. And then you can go into other parts of our state. People are struggling to stay in business. People are struggling to refinance and build homes and stay afloat. And so when we talk about equity, that's something that the census can bring to everyone. It also just takes a few minutes. So when I say it's easy, we have 11 questions currently. My guess is that we're going to talk about that on 2 of our other presentations. I will not for the sake of time now. But to answer 11 questions takes less than 10 minutes. And it's the first time the U.S. government is doing this online. So I'm really excited about that. You can do it on your iPhone, iPad, or any other smartphone that you have, sitting at your computer. And if you still want to do the other options for filling it out, you can dial in by phone. We have 13 languages available. Someone can help you through that process on the phone. We also have the paper form that you can still fill out if you opt to do it by paper, or if you opt to engage with an enumerator at the door, you still have that option. Confidentiality, I would just love to stress that we do not share out our information with any other federal agency. So just for the sake of clarity, we don't share this information with the IRS, we don't share it with ICE, with any other federal agency. The way that the rules work is that all of our information in statistical format only will be released to the White House at the end of 2020. It's aggregate data only. So I just really want to make this abundantly clear. People are protected by Title 13. We take an oath of life. So everyone, all of my colleagues sitting with me today in the room have taken an oath of life. It's not through the end of our tenure with the Census Bureau to protect this data. If we violate that trust of the American people, we face imprisonment and fines. So I just really want to identify that we are working hard to protect everyone's personal data. We've covered this, so just one more time. We go live on the internet March 23rd. So most folks know April 1st, and I do have a timeline in here, so folks can look at that later. Since all the slides are shared, we won't go over that later in the presentation. But our operations don't end until July 24th. The harder we work to encourage people to go on the internet and fill this out, the more taxpayer money we can save in the enumeration process. So here's where I did want to spend a couple of minutes. The George Washington University document that you see in the lower right-hand corner is called Counting for Dollars. George Washington University and their professors there have taken it upon themselves to do this amazing project called Counting for Dollars. There's a ton of information on the internet. You can pull all of this up yourself and do a deep dive on it. I do outreach and not really a data diehard kind of person, so I look for big takeaways in these projects. What I think is critical here is to mention that the per capita amount that's been assigned to Colorado is $1,481, essentially $1,500. And again, you're going to see different numbers as we move forward through today's presentation. Why is this important? Well, there are some data that say that there were about 18,000 children missed in Colorado in the 2010 count. If you do your math, and it's super simple, take 1,500 times 18,000, you're talking an exorbitant amount of opportunity in federal funding that can be coming into our local communities. And we don't want to have that happen again in 2020, which is why we talk about an accurate count, counting everyone once, only once and in the right place. So we have set out on a mission to do that. If you take the number 1,500 times 18,000 and then multiply that times a decade, which is again why we do the decennial census every 10 years, we're now talking billions of dollars that could have come into Colorado for federal funding. So this document really speaks to the power of why we do an enumeration, an actual enumeration. So let me take a couple minutes here. I've listed some things out and I've zoomed in on this document. You can see the per capita amount listed under the word Colorado. But for our planners or elected officials on the call and anyone outside of Colorado, this information is available on the internet for every state across the nation. So I think that you can pull this up and speak to some of your stakeholders in your local communities. But things that jump out when we talk about this, and I have this on the 5th bullet point here, transportation funding, highway planning and construction. Look at the dollar amounts and look at the conversation that you can have with stakeholders around the table in any conversation across Colorado, whether you're in rural communities or urban communities, sitting in downtown Denver, or if you're like me and when I was doing planning at some point in time, I was on I-25 for an hour and 15 minutes every single day. This speaks volumes to why the census matters to each and every single person in the state of Colorado. We can also talk about SNAP, CHIP, WIC, housing, anything else related to the federal funding listed on this document, and understand that each Coloradan needs to get a fair opportunity to access of federal funding and representation in Congress. So how are we delivering this? We're delivering this. How are we delivering the count? We're delivering this through formation of complete count committees throughout the entire state. I'm excited that we have had great progress. My goal is to hit all 64 counties before the end of April. We hope to see that come to fruition. But we also have in the room with us the chair of our state CCC. So when I started, I was by myself on the ground for representing the U.S. Census Bureau. We now will have at full capacity a team of about 25 to include a statewide media specialist. But we are working hard with local governments to form up these committees. They are voluntary committees that are formed up by the highest elected official within each jurisdiction, which is a lot of times we come out to governments and they say, well, we want you to talk to our planner, we want you to talk to our demographer, and I come to the door and I'm the pesky one that says, that's great, we want you in the room, but I need to talk to your mayor, I need to talk to your city council members, I need to talk to your county commissioners, because it's really, really relative to your highest elected official, why they understand the relevance and the critical nature of getting out the word about the 2020 census through a complete count committee. So again, for the sake of time, I won't read these out to you. You can certainly follow up with questions or punch anything in right now and we'll come back to it. So what I did was I included this folder that we're carrying around to local jurisdictions. I saw the attendee list. Many of you already have these. If you don't, know that we're coming to you. Who's on these? Look on the upper left-hand corner of this slide. We have tribal, state, and local government work that we're doing. So we have not just our partnership specialists in the room, but tribal specialists who are also working within our tribal nations to do the same sort of work within tribal communities. As I mentioned, we're going to hear from our state chair in just a moment from the state CCC. And then local, those can look like county, they can look city, they can be complementary and regional. They can also be nonprofit or business CCCs, complete count committees. They can be whatever you want them to be because we look to you as the expert in your area. When are we forming these? I love this because rarely will you see an exclamation point in print. And this one cracked me up. I've been corrected when I do writing for public. Don't do all caps. Sounds like you're yelling. Don't do an exclamation point. You shouldn't do that. And so the answer, when are we forming these up? Now. All caps, exclamation point. It's critical that we get out an accurate count, and that's why we need to do this now. I love this slide because it really gives just an easy imagery of why a complete count committee should be all-inclusive. So this is an example, and my good friend here with the City and County of Denver is going to share her organizational chart, which I actually use around the state as an example of how can we be connecting with every facet of our community to talk about the census and why it's important that people self-respond on March 23rd. And so this graphic talks about each subcommittee that you could have. So if you have a large community like Denver, you're already seeing this and thinking, all right, this is great, I can work with this. If you have a small community and maybe you're the planner and also the city clerk, and then your mayor is also your neighbor, and y'all have been doing and switching hats for the last few times that you've run for office, you're thinking, how can we execute all of this? Well, we can, and I promise you that we're going to help you. So let me jump ahead to the next slide and talk about why. Partnership staff provides a 2-hour comprehensive training. We come in and we train your group. We've been in parts of the state where there have been 5 people in the room. We've been in the parts of the state where there have been 60 and 70 people in the room for the training. We will do all of those. That's what we're here for. We also provide regular updates and work to address questions from the community and from the CCC. Once we're fully staffed, there will be a very comprehensive way of getting out our messaging. Right now, we are staying in touch with all community members, whether you're just getting started, you're in formation, or up and running. As I mentioned, this is upgoing and occurring now. You'll see that I keep drawing attention to March 23rd. That's when we go live on the internet. April 1st is Census Day, so that you'll see that time frame. It's rather small, so we have a lot of work to do between now and March 23rd. And I do want to emphasize this. We work for the CCC's work to engage, increase awareness, provide trusted messenger advocacy and support for the census in local communities. And I think I've kind of covered some of what partnership specialists do, but just to elaborate here, we are simultaneously, while you're forming these up, seeking partnerships within the community. So there will be some overlap. And we talk about that with all of our community partners. Everyone at the table knows about this. So while y'all are doing your CCC formations and or training, we are diving deep into the community and meeting with community leaders, stakeholders, faith leaders, folks. We were just having a conversation about jails and county officials who talk about where people are housed, and that's something called group quarters, which we won't go into today. We're making sure that we're available at events. This summer and this fall are critical. We want to be at all of the county fairs in rural Colorado, making sure that we're connecting with folks, meeting them where they are. We also will come and speak, such as today, at any of the events that you have. We are available and would love to engage with your community. As I mentioned, this timeline will not be discussed today, but it is provided for your awareness. Happy to follow up on that. 4 offices. We're going to have 4 offices in Colorado. We're going to have Denver, Colorado Springs, Longmont, and Aurora. The Denver office is currently open. If any of my friends are on the phone from the city from the city of Lakewood in Jefferson County, and you did addressing like I did in Lakewood, you see the address is technically in Lakewood. So that's AKA our Denver office. We are hiring for these offices now, and we'll answer some questions related to jobs now, but your elected officials want to know where and when are you creating jobs. Jobs have been created. The pay is extremely competitive. They are temporary in nature. However, the benefits are great, and again, the pay is very competitive, and we're asking bluntly, we need your help. We need your help in getting out our word about the job. So we will come to you and say, will you post this on your website? Will you blast out an email? When you say yes, we'll circle back with you and ask, by the way, did you have a chance to do that? I love this. I put this together, and all of us here sitting at the table, it's just such a great feeling. We do increase our capacity for outreach through collaborative and supportive efforts. So the folks you're hearing from today, these are the folks at the table, and without you, we cannot be as successful as we need to be. Closing out and moving on to my next colleague here, I do want to mention that we're on social media, so you sharing our messages, reposting, retweeting, tagging us. When you're on LinkedIn and you're posting something, say, hey, at Census Bureau, add in that handle, add in hashtag 2020 Census, which I just happen to add in on the slide. Make sure that you're elevating our message and helping us engage with the community, educate the community, and most importantly, motivate them for self-response. One more plug. We are hiring. So if I hadn't said it before, we are hiring, and both of the hyperlinks are listed now for folks. And I will gladly turn this back over. As I leave my contact information, please take a screenshot, a snipping tool, picture with your phone, or whatever you need to do, and reach out as needed, and I'll turn it back over to my friend, Kevin. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Lily. Well, so we have a second poll ready to go while we bring up the our next presentation. This asks where you're attending the webinar from today, if you're from Colorado, if you're from the Denver region, or further away. So we just wanted to kind of get a sense of where the audience was calling in from. All right, so it's looking like most people are from the Denver region, although we do have a pretty good number of people from elsewhere in the United States. That's pretty cool that we're going broader than just the Denver region today. So with that, I will turn things over to Natrice Bryant, who is the Deputy Executive Director at the Colorado Department of Local Affairs. She is charged with coordinating statewide Census 2020 complete count efforts. She received a bachelor's degree in communication, sociology, and criminal justice from the University of Colorado, Denver, and earned master's degrees in business administration and strategic management from Regis University here in Denver as well. And with that, Natrice Bryant.
Thank you, Kevin. So welcome, everybody. I'm excited to hear that people are from other states so we can kind of share the partnerships that we're doing at the state of Colorado. So as Kevin said, I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the Department of Local Affairs, which oversees housing, property, taxes, local government, and Board of Assessments and disaster recovery for the state. So we have a pretty broad goal as far as how we capture everything within the state. So being in that role, I was also appointed as the state chair for the Complete Count Committee for Colorado. And that's kind of where I'll start my efforts of how the state's participating, what we're doing, the need for local partnerships with everyone, as well as the need for partnerships with the federal government, just simply because that's how we're going to get things done. As this talks about, the one thing that the state has gone with for messaging is that it's important, it's easy, and it's safe. So as you know, or as you saw, very similar to what Lily had stated earlier, but this is a federal, state, local, and community partnership. And so the one thing I want to highlight here is that yes, it's required by federal law, but also we want to make sure that the state and local communities are participating. And the one way that we found for this to be most effective was going to the trusted voices in the community. It's not me who's going to go out and talk to someone and they're going to be like, yes, Natrice is the person that we can talk to, which I am for the state committee, but it's the community trusted voices that we really need to get into, the nonprofit organizations, the churches, things like that. So I just want to emphasize the collaborative effort that Colorado has taken forth and every state should take forth, is that this is really a four-piece membership, and that's how everything's going to be successful for Colorado. As Lily talked about, there are three important dates that we look at from the statewide side. Obviously, the count of the population beginning on March 23rd, and then the delivery of apportionment counts to the president in aggregate data starting at December 31st, 2020, and then also the redistricting. And so I'm going to pull up a map in my next couple of slides that talks a little bit more about how that looks for Colorado. I think you guys will find that interesting with what dollar amounts and what congressional districts look like for the state as compared to other states across the nation. The next piece I want to talk about is the importance behind the census. The importance behind it is not just that we get a complete and accurate count. We want, obviously, for that to happen, but as Lily talked about, there's several programs that are affected by the dollars that we get for the census. And so here in Colorado, we had a couple of bills that did not pass in the previous election. So we do feel a little bit of tension when it comes to specifically transportation. There's two bills that did not go through, so we have to figure out a way to make sure that we've got the dollars that we need for transportation, as well as WIC, as well as Tier 1 education grants. But we really need to focus on making sure that we're able to have the infrastructure that's necessary for Colorado. For statistical purposes, the demography office sits under our DOLA's purview, and we've gained about 537,000 people in the last year. That's people coming in. We also have net migration, which is people coming in and out. But you feel the growth every time you drive on the roads. You feel the growth in small communities. You feel the growth in Denver specifically. Lily talked about I-25, but you feel the growth in other places as well. We want that tension to be stretched. We're working on dollars that are appropriated for about 4 million people. Right now we have 5.7 million people per the data that we've received from the state demographer's office. So 5.7 million people is very different than 4 million people. And so you can see the kind of the need for us to have the approximate and accurate count. When we look at reapportionment, With these a green state, with Colorado, we stand to gain an additional seat. And so you'll look at some of the other states who stand to gain a couple of more seats than Colorado, but we stand to gain one additional congressional seat if we get the accurate and complete count that we need for Colorado. That's huge. You look at some of the other states, Texas is the only one that we see as of right now that stands to gain 3 congressional seats, and then you've got Florida that stands to gain 2. But look at how many other states stand to gain at least 1. There's 4 other states outside of Colorado that stand to gain at least 1 additional congressional seat. The data that we have at the Demography Office, specifically in DOLA, is that we looked at the population growth between 2016 and 2018, short-term growth. If we continue that trend from 2018 to 2020, that is why we are stating that we can stand to gain an additional congressional seat. It means a lot for us to have that additional seat. It means a lot for other communities to have that additional congressional seat. So we really want to push for that complete count. But just so you guys understand what other states are looking at gaining, there's some states that are looking at losing the congressional seat, so those are highlighted in the pink. And then you also have one state that's highlighted in the red that could potentially lose 2 congressional seats. So that's just data that I think it's important for people to see. As far as demographic-wise, what that looks like, I think it's important for us to understand where we really stand in Colorado to gain that additional congressional seat with an accurate count. When we talk about redistricting, those types of boundaries are done also in partnership with the federal government, but our Office in Demography looks at the types of redistricting that could happen if we get this complete and accurate count. I won't go into them deeply, but I do think it's important for you guys to see that there are state and House Senate districts, there's county commissioner districts, and there's city council districts that could be redrawn based on the data that we obtain. We know that there's certain counties in Colorado that are growing much faster than others, and it's important for us to have the redistricting and the drawing of those boundaries accurate for 2020 and moving forward. So Lily talked a little bit about dollars, so this is where we're going to come in with different dollar amounts. And so Lily's original discussion about the 1481 is based on 16 federal programs that are across the board. Our data, we took a little bit of a deeper dive. It's also based on updated statistics from 2016, but it looks at the amount of dollars being $880 billion. It's actually 883, but I just say 880 billion federal dollars allocated. But that's looking at 55 federal programs, not the 16. So if we're looking at 55 federal programs, that dollar amount actually increases to approximately $2,300 per person per head for the next 10 years. Now, I'm not wonderful at math, but that's a lot of money. It actually comes out to be about $13 billion in Colorado that we could stand. If you say 100,000 people don't fill out the census, that's $2,300 times 100,000 times 10. So that's dollars that we stand to lose. I went a little bit deeper into some of the programs that could be impacted because this is where we're having our storytelling part. The important piece is it's one thing to say it's federally required. It's another thing to say that the state wants complete counts. But this is where it really hits home. Looking at public libraries, I don't think people understand that public library funding can be associated with the census data. Tuition assistance, community college, programs for veterans, public assistance, public housing. Section 8 sits under DOLA's purview. We hand out the Section 8 vouchers for the state, and we look at the amount of money that we could stand to lose. We know a lot of people are not growing as far as their income as quickly as the cost of living is growing in Colorado. So we have seen an increase in people applying for those vouchers and applying for that government assistance. Affordable housing in Colorado is something that we continuously look at, so I do want to bring highlight to that. Also, your community centers. A lot of times people think that the dollars just kind of fall out of the sky. That's not necessarily the case. These are things that impact your neighborhood. So it's not just the programs that everybody thinks about that are larger, it's the community impact that you're really facing if we do not get the full accurate count of who lives in Colorado. We talk about why census data matters. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but these are some bullets as to why. A lot of you on the call could be planners. It matters for your planning data. It also matters for the program evaluations that you're doing, and it also matters for the program qualifications. We don't qualify for certain programs if we don't have a certain number of people, individuals that can be served. So it's important for us to know who lives here, where they live, and how that impacts like even businesses. Businesses will sometimes look at whether or not they go into a certain community. This looks at your economic development. If they're going into a certain community based on the dollars that you receive, they can say, well, I know this group, this population of people are in this area, and it's important for you guys to have that data. We also look at the long-term trends, and those long-term trends really look at, like I talked about, the economic development. We also have a new thing that we're kind of looking at in Colorado, which is opportunity zones, and that will kind of trigger some of the things that you guys on the phone would like to talk about, because opportunity zones are showing places in which businesses can develop that make sense for them. If we have developers coming in continuously, they want to know where they can go and build and actually develop in that community. So that's why the data matters. We're really looking at getting into telling that story for everyone, because it is one thing to say it matters for the federal program. It's another thing to say this is how it impacts you locally. The easy component, Lily talked about the ways in which people can respond. These are the 13 languages that you will see for the census for you to be able to respond in the census. Now, just because these 13 languages exist, on the 1 year out, the Census Bureau talked about there will also be an additional 52 languages that there will be assistance information placed. So just because someone's language is not part of the 13 languages, there are resources available that are in other languages to help them understand that they can go online and fill it out. Now, working for the Department of Local Affairs, we recognize that broadband is an issue across the state, so we have partnerships with the local libraries to set up resources so that there's designated computers where people can come in your community and fill that out if they don't necessarily have connectivity. Some people like to fill things out on paper. I do still like to fill things out on paper. And then you have some people that like to call in to do their data. And so there's different ways that we can target all the different communities. But the one thing we're working on at the state is to make sure everyone understands what it means for them to fill out on one of the three. And if they do not, then there will be an enumerator that will come to their door and have a conversation about filling out the census. As Lily stated, it's 11 questions, it's 10 minutes. And these are the 11 questions that they're covering, the types of things that they'll be asking. It's stuff that we should know. It's not something that you wouldn't necessarily know. So it's easy, it's quick, it's easy. And it's something that we definitely continue to fill, that we try to educate people on, because sometimes people will ask us the question of what are the questions? What are they asking me? This is what's being asked. And I think it's important for you all to be able to understand these are the things that are being asked in the census. These are the types of questions that they'll be covering. It's nothing that's too in-depth that people couldn't understand or explain that information for their household. I talk about the citizenship question because as it stands right now, it is on the census. There are, as I created this slide, it said New York and California, but now we have Maryland that's also joined in over the last couple of days, I believe. I'm rejecting the inclusion of the citizenship question. This is how it's worded on the census right now. We are working very hard with the communities in Colorado to help with the understanding of what that means. We also are talking about the relevance and what it means. So these are just so that you guys know, there's definitely been the conversation, and there will continue to be the conversation about the citizenship question, whether or not it will be included. As it sits today, it's still on there. So we do have those conversations with communities. We welcome conversation about what that means. And we also talk with some of our nonprofit associations to understand what the needs in those communities are. We're working with churches to do some outreach. We even also have an immigrant, refugee, and people of color subcommittee on the state census, our state CCC, that focuses specifically on this question. So when people ask, we obviously have the answers to talk about it. We also want to talk about the fact that it's safe. Lily went over this as well, but I'll talk a little bit about it. A lot of people are not aware about the confidentiality for the 72 years. It's something that we're not sharing. The Census Bureau is not allowed to share it with another federal agency, and sometimes that disconnect happens where people believe that because it's one federal agency, the data is available to another federal agency. And so we're really out talking about and combating that message to state that it is illegal for anyone to share that information. So that's one thing. And then we talk about, if that were to be shared, which it won't be, that the imprisonment up to 5 years and then the $250,000 fine ties to anything that happens that breaks that code. These are the dates that Lily talked about earlier, so I won't harp too much into these, but as she stated, March 23rd is when the enumeration starts. You guys will be able to fill out that census form, whether it be online, through the phone, or through paper, starting on March 23rd. April 1st is what's recognized as Census Day. We did a one-year out event that I'll talk a little bit more about in a couple of minutes, but this does not end on April 1st. There is follow-up that's done. There are additional data collection responses that are done. So people sometimes will believe that it ends on April 1st, but I'm here to tell you that it does not. You can see we're running non-response follow-up beginning in early May, and it runs all the way through August. And then the reapportionment is shared with the president at the end of 2020. So it's important to recognize that just because someone doesn't fill out their census by the 1st of April, we do follow up, and the Census Bureau does the follow-up to go to doors, to knock on doors, to have conversations with people. But because there's multiple ways for them to fill this out in advance, we hope that those numbers will fall down. But as stated also, it saves taxpayer dollars that we're not sending people out to every single door. So here's some of the challenges that we've recognized within the state, and I'm sure that this can be transferable to any state, but we have a mobile population. We have a lot of people who are mobile and like the fact that they can fill it out online, but then you have a population that's not necessarily a big fan of that. So we're looking at the constraints behind that, and we're also doing some outreach. We also recognize that there's a distrust in government right now. And so we address that. It's not something that we continuously dance around. We're having those tough conversations. We have 8 subcommittees on our state complete count committee that are looking at that distrust factor. They're looking at messaging for certain communities. They're looking at increasing the diversity of the population on our state complete count committee subcommittees so that we can actually hit some of the populations that may not be accurately represented on our 34-member panel for the state complete count committee. We also have a group of individuals that are defined as hard to count. And so the reason I put these up here is so that you understand it is not just people that are non-English speaking that are considered hard to count. There is a plethora of individuals that are considered hard to count. I sometimes make the joke of young children, how do we forget to count our kids? We know that they're in existence, we know that we have them, but you have babies that are being born, you have people under 5 that for some reason we just don't necessarily count them. Or they think that if you're over 18, then you'll be counted as everybody. We want to make sure that everyone counts, which is why we came up with the slogan of Everyone Counts in Colorado. These are just some of the groups that we've identified as hard to count populations. And so each of these groups are being targeted through our subcommittees to make sure and ensure that messaging is specific to this group. We have a communications, media, and outreach subcommittee that will be focusing on the messaging and how we hit these particular groups and tell a story that relates to the people that are in this category. So how will this work? Our state role at the Department of Local Affairs and across the board, we have other agencies from the state that sit on our state complete count committee purposefully. We want to make sure that we're utilizing all of our state agencies and the current governor's administration to get the messaging out at a statewide level, but we're also looking at leveraging the work that we're doing across the state. So sometimes we'll have best practices that will work across the state, and we want that to trickle down to the local complete count committees. So we continuously communicate with Lily and her staff to make sure that that messaging is consistent across the board. But we also want the local CCCs to be able to brand their own efforts. But we have materials that are already created, which I will cover in a moment, that allow for people to take documents that are already created and just brand them as their own, specific to what their locals need. The other piece that I want to talk about is our demography team. So I don't want you guys to think that we just started doing this work a couple of weeks ago. It's been going on for quite some time. We've had housing unit boundaries that were done in partnership with the Census. We started efforts back in 2017. So this is not something that just began a couple of weeks ago. We have an updated master address file that has every housing unit in the state of Colorado. We know that someone lives there. We just don't know how many people live in that housing unit. So the benefit of us having housing underneath our purview is that we know when all the new developments are happening. We know when all the new apartment complexes are being built. We know when all the new structures are being built. So we have all of those addresses. It's us being able to understand who and how many people live in those units. Lily also talked about group quarters. We have some efforts that have been done for the last year and a half that look at prison populations, nursing home, and college dorms. We also have a higher education subcommittee that's focusing on how do we hit the kids that are coming back to school, and also communicating to those students that their parents, if they are not there for more than 6 months and 1 day, that they should be counted. If they are there 6 months and 1 day, they should be counted in the group quarters findings, which I think is something that people are like, well, how do I know what's considered most of the time? It's 6 months and 1 day or more. This is an overlap just showing what the difference between the state and local communities have, and then also the census staff. So Lily talked about all the things that her partnership group does, but our efforts is to be providing that trusted voice in the community. Like I said, it's one thing for me as a state government employee to come and talk to people about the census. It's another thing for us to engage the church pastors. It's another thing for us to engage the chaplains. It's another thing for us to engage the nonprofit organization executive directors who are trusted voices in the community because they are the ones that are doing all the work at the ground level. We encourage formations of local and county complete count committees, and then we also are looking at local support to promote the voice that we have moving with the state. So I'll talk a little bit about who's been formed, what's been formed, so you guys have a little bit of information. Some of you on the phone may actually have complete count committees formed in your area and not realize it, so I'll share a little bit about who that might look like for you. Lily's contact information is in all of our presentations when we talk about the census, simply because they're the ones that are going to go out and do the work to help with the formations of those complete count committees. We always provide her information to make sure that she has the trusted source and the trusted voice and the same messaging that we put forth. So we developed a 2020 census website that was launched last week. It was through the governor's press release. We also, all you will find is resources and information that we continuously update on a day-to-day basis. The information that's provided on the website was updated as late as last night. So you will have all the resources and information from the statewide level so that you can pass that along to your colleagues. We also have requested funding from the legislature for $300,000 to help with marketing and outreach. We're still waiting on the approval from the long bill from the governor. And then also we have sharing ideas and then leveraging the state as a resource. I want to emphasize that these local complete count committees are formed to understand the local issues. The state is a resource for those local communities to reach out to us to get information that they may need, which is why our next colleague will be talking a little bit about how the local effort has been pushed forth in Denver. The importance of understanding our state CCC is to increase awareness about the Census 2020 and motivate residents in the community to respond with the result of the best, most accurate count for Colorado. I've listed our 8 subcommittees so you can see the areas in which we're touching. As I stated, there are 34 members that sit on the state CCC, and each of those members are a part of one of the 8 subcommittees that are listed up here for you. Each of those subcommittees have been doing hard work to come up with an action plan. Those action plans look at key partners. We also have a statewide calendar that we have shared with all the events across the state. So we actually are focusing on things outside of Denver because Denver has their own calendar, which we link up with to see where we're going to be. Overlap's not a bad thing, but if we know that Denver is going to be there, we might provide a resource to be there, but then we might not as well. We're looking at things all the way from Palisade to Cortez. So we want to make sure that those things are covered. We also look at the immigrant, refugee, and communities of color. We're looking at local and state government, rural, business, and nonprofits. And as I talked about, our communications subcommittee will be looking at messaging across the state and what works best for all of the subcommittees that are listed up here and additional groups that we may not have identified. Here is a snippet of our website. So it has Colorado Where Everyone Counts, our logo that we completed for the state CCC. And as I stated, there's a lot of information up here that's resource-based. So we link to the census website if appropriate. We have fact sheets that we've created that anyone is welcome to download and utilize and add their local branding. If you want it in a Word file or something that's editable, you just contact us and we send it over to you in a Word document. We also have any FAQs that may have come up, so if there's things that are being asked, we post these on our website on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we're covering what we need to cover. And also census jobs are on there. If we have anybody that's locally wanting to apply for a job, we share those on our social media. We have Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, but we also post their jobs under the census job section. We also have the Roam tool under Census Data Tool, so if you're interested in Roam data, you can also go in there and click in and see what data you need. And then we have information about any census news that comes out and the Complete Count Committee. If you want to get more involved, there's contact information on there as well. If you're interested, like I said, in starting a local complete count committee, please contact Lily Grego. We have her contact information up there. If you have questions about the state CCC, my contact information is below. And if you have any information that you think should be added to the website, please reach out to Adam Bickford, who does all of our updates from our demography office. And how you can get involved, this is one of the fact sheets that we continue to cover. Sometimes people will say, well, what do you want me to do? And the ask depends on who you are. It depends on what type of connections you have, but what we're looking for is people who are really connected in the community, who have ideas. If you have a large group or a presentation that you think we should be at, contact us. We want to be at as many events as possible, and like I said, we share all of those things on our statewide calendar. But if there's ways and messaging that you think we can get out, one idea that we're thinking about is having maybe at a town hall or having localized forums where people can come in and ask questions about the census and have kind of a hearing, so to speak. So that's something that we definitely want to cover, and we'll have one of our local partners talk about the importance of that. But we want to hear everyone's voice as they move forward. This is just our contact information as stated before, as resources, and then I will go ahead and turn it back over to Kevin.
Well, thank you very much, Natrice. So just to reiterate, everybody who's registered for the event today, you will receive an email from me at the end of the event, and we'll have all of our presentations. You'll have all of our presenters' contact information, so you can get involved locally. So with that, we've got another poll for you. This poll is just going to ask you why you got involved in the webinar, why you decided to join today, which will help us just kind of, get a better sense for your reason for being involved today. And then once again, I will, there have been a number of questions entered into the chat box, so continue to ask questions there. All right, so it looks like a lot of people just want to know about best practices, and so I think that that's going to be a really good kickoff for our next presenter. And so our next presenter is Kay Kavanaugh. She is the census coordinator for the city and county of Denver, and she works in the Agency for Human Rights and Community Partnerships. She's responsible for delivering a successful census for the city of Denver with attention to populations that have been traditionally undercounted. With a passion for both numbers and people, Kay has worked for the Colorado Health Foundation, the Colorado Children's Campaign, the North Dakota State Demographer's Office, and the U.S. Census Bureau's regional office here in Denver. Kay has called Colorado home for more than 2 decades, having lived in Castle Rock, Golden, and now West Denver, representing most of the DRCOG region in this experience. So Kay has bachelor's and master's degrees in sociology and social science research from North Dakota State University. With that, I turn it over to Kay.
Thank you so much. So I'm coming to you with the focus from Denver, but my goal here is to give you some ideas about what you can do in your local municipality, regardless of where you are. So if you don't know anything about Denver, but most of you probably know a lot of this, Denver is home to approximately 700,000 people, thank you to census data. We have a strong mayor form of government. About a quarter of Denver households speak a language other than English at home. Denver is, of course, a regional hub and has a large nonprofit presence, a large business presence. And we discussed this a little bit earlier, but recent years have brought some rapid population growth to our area. And related to that, we estimate that about 5,500 individuals are experiencing homelessness right now in the city of Denver. So I want to give you a high-level overview of our approach. For both 2010 and 2020 censuses, Denver hired a full-time temporary staff member to focus on a complete count for the city and county of Denver. And in 2020, of course, that is me. We have a budget of about $400,000 per year, and that budget includes my salary. And then a large portion of the rest of the budget is going to go to marketing and outreach. We've secured a marketing partner who has met with all these subcommittees, so the tiny little graphic that I can send you if you email me a closer up version just shows you the structure of our Complete Count Committee, and the subcommittees are the little circles on the bottom. There are 13 right now. I'm trying to keep them at 13, not add any more. Each of those little boxes below that represents a co-lead for that group, and then we expect those co-leads to be bringing on board local folks who are closest to the ground in their issue area. So some examples of the Complete Count Committee, subcommittees are immigrant and refugee, similar to the state. We have a faith community, we have a reentry community, we have a committee focused on data mapping and technology, and we have 3 co-chairs, and these are high-level folks in the community. So one of them is a city council member, one of them is a well-respected faith leader, and then the other is a president of a local university. So that assures us that we have both a top-down and a bottom-up approach throughout the city. We formed our Complete Count Committee in late 2018, but of course it is still not too late to form yours if you don't have one. We've talked kind of ad nauseum about how to do that, and so I won't cover that at all. But I just want to give you an example of a structure of the Complete Count Committee at a local level. And then I want to give you some examples of what we've worked on so far. Many of these are free or very low cost things that communities can do to show your support for the census. So for example, last month the Denver City Council passed a proclamation in support of an accurate 2020 census. This was led by one of the City Council members who is on our Complete Count Committee. So it shows that the mayor and the City Council is behind the efforts to do a complete count for the census. We have also created a website on our city webpage. So again, if you have a municipal webpage, this is probably quote unquote free or close to free to stand up some local information. You are a trusted source within your community and probably a place that lots of people visit on a regular basis. And as we get closer to Census Day, we will draw more attention to this on all the City of Denver websites through the homepage. Another thing that we're doing that I think is pretty interesting is utilizing the city and county staff. So the City of Denver employs more than 11,000 people, and many of those folks are public-facing in their day-to-day roles. Hardly any of them deal with census, of course, but we want to take advantage of their public-facing positions to provide information and make everyone that works for the City and County of Denver a census ambassador. So the image is some examples of how individual city agencies plan to work on the census. For example, we can share information on any correspondence from the city to its residents through library checkout slips, people adopting pets at the animal shelter, property tax bills. They want to push the information out at the annual Valentine's Day wedding event that they do at the City and County of Denver. Like, there's a million ways, if you're creative about it, that you can kind of tag on to what's already happening in your community. And I realize not all of these will be, not all of these will happen in every community, of course. And then we touched on this, totally touched on this a little bit, using social media, because again, it's free pretty much, right? And you can look at things, places like the Census Bureau and other folks that are constantly already sharing a bunch of information about the census, and you can retweet it, you can reshare it, you can put your local spin on it, you can reach out to folks and say, hey, can I use your graphic? Is there a way you can help me, you know, make this happen for my community? And we all have the same goal in getting everyone counted, so I don't imagine that you'll get much resistance in that kind of effort. We also plan to do some kind of grassroots media. I don't know if that's the right word, but sending information home with kids in their Friday folders through the school district, getting information in church bulletins, having pastors speak about it from the pulpit, working with our neighborhood organizations to get them to talk to their residents to spread the word across the entire city. We know from marketing research that it takes about 7 times for someone to hear something and actually learn it. And so with the city talking about it, with the state talking about it, with the pastor talking about it, with our nonprofit partners talking about it, hopefully we'll get to everyone and help them understand the importance of the census and their participation. So this is a quick summary. What can your municipality do? So you can allocate funds if possible. I realize that's not always possible. And there are a bunch of things that you can do that don't cost very much money or any money at all. So back to creating a complete count committee. You'll probably be sick of us saying that by the end of this webinar, but we feel pretty strongly about that in the room here. Find champions to share the message, whether that champion is your sheriff, whether it's a principal, whether it's a 3rd grader who for some reason is super interested and you want to do a little video of her. That's awesome. It doesn't matter who it is, you just want to spread your message as wide as possible. And use social media, like I said, an existing channel. Here's my contact information. I would love to hear from you. Email is best, and I will turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you very much, Kay. So once again, if you're working, if you're in a municipal government, some of those strategies might be portable to your community. Some follow-up about that as well. So we have one final poll for you today, and that's just to think about populations in your community that might be the hardest to reach. And we have this poll before we turn it over to Together We Count. All right, so from the polls that are coming back, it looks like the homeless population, non-English speakers, and older adults are going to be difficult to hit for a lot of folks. I'm sure that is pretty similar to what our panelists have heard. And so with that, I am going to kick it over to Rosemary Rodriguez and Jillian Winborn with Together We Count. Rosemary is the Executive Director of Together We Count. She was the former State Director for Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado and served as a Commissioner on the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. Prior to that, Rosemary served a term on the Denver City Council and was elected City Council President in 2005. She chaired the 2001 Colorado Reapportionment Commission, a constitutional body responsible for redrawing legislative districts after the 2000 census. She's a Colorado native and attended Metropolitan State College, which is now Metropolitan State University, where she studied political science. Jillian is the program director for Together We Count, where prior to joining, she spent many years working in housing and transportation, focusing on marketing, logistics, and research in Oregon and Scotland. A Denver native, Jillian has a Master of Public Policy from the University of Edinburgh and holds a bachelor's from Oberlin College. Go small liberal arts colleges. And so with that, I will turn it over to Rosemary and Jillian with Together We Count.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm just going to introduce the project, and then Jillian will take off with the slides. But this is Rosemary speaking. In 2017, I had a kind of a Tabarrok-like moment where I realized there's fear and apprehension in the community, and that we were going to have difficulty getting people to comply with the census And having volunteered, this is my 4th census, and as the county clerk in Denver, serving in a position very much like Kay's in 2000, I realized through life experience primarily, like many probably on the call, that the census is super important to state and local government. Jillian will walk us through the slides. I might interject when we talk about dollars, but we're very excited for the opportunity to be here today.
So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into some hard-to-count communities that Latrice brought up earlier. Then we're going to kind of talk a little bit about some national research and then what our role is. So Together We Count is a nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated specifically to census work. So we will cease to exist after the 2020 census, and we do exist at this time because we do feel like, compared to previous census cycles, that there's a lot of cause to be concerned about this census. So as you've seen this timeline before, almost all of us have had this in our presentation, but I think it's important to note that there's still a lot of time to do really impactful census work, and that it's not too late. We still have about a year out, and that is a significant amount of time. From a community perspective, I'm just going to highlight that door-to-door enumeration begins on May 20th and ends on around July. So that is going to be a very complicated time for a lot of community members, and that is something that we have really focused in on and trying to mitigate against some of the fear and apprehension of those communities. So as Latrice mentioned, hard-to-count population is a very all-encompassing, group. It is a definition set by the Census Bureau, and in previous census cycles, older adults have not been difficult to enumerate. In the state of Colorado, there is legislation at our state capitol that has not passed through that would do a grant program to local governments and nonprofits to do census outreach. Dr. Cog was instrumental in making sure that older adults were included in that legislation. So the local governments and nonprofits can include adults over 65 if that legislation passes. The other major component that I'm going to highlight in this presentation is young children. So the way that we've found out that there are about 1.5 million estimated undercount is the Colorado Fiscal Institute did a report at the end of January of this year that estimated this population, and they also included older adults. The 1.5 million is about the number that we have in Colorado that are potentially hard to count. This is just a little bit of a deeper dive from that same report into the hard to count areas across the Dr. Cog. Weld count, we included the entire number for Weld County, so that one might be a little bit off in terms of the Dr. Cog areas, but you can see it's a significant amount of people, and Denver has some of the highest, but also Arapahoe, Adams, Jefferson. You're talking about a lot of different people in this area. Go ahead. Yeah.
So we pulled out the census programs in the funding reports that support older adult programming. And as you can see, these are essential, really quality of life programs that our older population is entitled to have access to. And you might argue that Section 8 is not just for older adults, and that's correct. It's not just for them, but definitely a program they benefit from. We looked at Dr. Cog's budget. More than half of the budget is dependent on federal funding. And having been a policymaker at the local level, I realized how important Dr. Cog was to many of the decisions we made. And just using this to underscore that the importance of the census, also the membership factor in being a member. One of them is population. Part of it is of your assessed value, but more than half of the membership amount is based on population, reliable census number.
Talking further deep dive on a hard to count population, in Colorado we missed 18,000 children in the 2010 census. And the 2010 census for Colorado was considered a good count. So it was around 74%, I believe, in response rate, which was on par with the national average. And so this is troubling for us because this was a year where it was a good count. Colorado is 10th in the country for top children missed in the 2010 census. Over 8,000 of those were Latino children. And, you know, it begs the question of why children were undercounted, and there's not a lot of reasons that we understand, but tying it into DRCOG's priorities, around 40,000 grandparents were their primary caregiver for grandchildren. So I think it emphasizes that this is a full population count. It might affect different groups more or less, but it really, all of the federal numbers depend on everyone being counted. This is also indicative of how it can be really confusing on how to respond on the census. So if you have, you know, if you're a grandparent and your daughter and grandchild live with you, how are you going to respond? Are you a household? Are you a separate unit? Is your daughter and grandchild a separate unit? You know, all of these questions can get really complicated, and it leaves people unsure how to respond. Factoring in living in more complicated households, we've had big population growth. We have families living in multiple families living in one housing unit. Also in Colorado, we have about 1 in 4 live in mixed-house households. All of this will factor into how people decide how to respond. This also leads into the citizenship question. Latrice touched on it a lot, but I just want to emphasize the quote on the right that 3 years ago I didn't have problems with the immigration question. And that is information and research from the Census Bureau. So we know that a lot of different communities and people just do not want to answer this question for various reasons. And so we will need to message and mitigate against that question when the decision is made in June. So how will people respond? We have a large, hard-to-count population. We're not always 100% sure how they will respond. But in 2018, the Census Bureau did its end-to-end test in Rhode Island, Providence County. In Providence County, the city of Providence is a minority-majority city. The county is not, so it kind of gives us a little bit of an indication of how people will respond to potentially the citizenship question. It was not on the form, but the decision to put it on the form for 2020 was made about 2 weeks before this test started. So as you can see, I've highlighted the Hispanic response was about 43%. That didn't mean that they didn't count everybody, but it means that 43% decided to initially fill out the form. That 48% means that people going into the community door knocking had to make up for that, for the rest of that number. So this is, you know, and the total response was about 56%. If we're comparing that to 2010 with the 74% response rate, potentially, you know, we are looking at a truncated count. So all of these factors lead into us needing to make a comprehensive message. So we work closely with national advocacy organizations. So the organizations Color Change, NCAI, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, NALEO, and Arab American Institute all did their own census-specific research. And the common thread through all of them was that communities are affected by the census. Funding affects the census. Our schools, hospitals, and first responders all depend on us to count in the census. So it was a really good, encouraging result from all of these different, you know, vastly different research that happened, saying that people will more likely respond if they understand the census's impact to their community. Also, what came out of that research was who are the trusted sources of information for census education. Family members, medical providers, navigators, and educators are all the most trusted members in their community to be able to relay census information. This plays into what we are doing in Colorado as a collaborative organization in terms of us as a C3, the state, the Census Bureau, and the city level. We work with national organizations, as I mentioned, to do the community-specific and hard-to-count specific messaging and research. We're working with the Census Bureau and also state and local government. We as an organization are here to fill in the gaps and support nonprofit organizations specifically. And we are doing that through training and communication to specific hard-to-count populations. There are already so many organizations across Colorado that are already working with these communities on the ground, and we just want to make sure that they're supported in census work, because the census happens once every 10 years. It's really difficult for people to completely pivot and to dedicate resources and money to census-specific work. So this is what we're here for, to support that aspect of it.
We'll wrap up with just a couple of thoughts. One, we're very flat. We're a very flat organization. We're trying to raise about $500,000 in mini grant funds for your small nonprofits all over the state, and that we really may not have been in your community, but have probably been talking to associations with members in your community. We're using the Affordable Care Act enrollment as our model, and really working with a lot of health organizations and hospitals. We really, again, appreciate Dr. Cog including us on today's panel.
Thank you very much, Jillian and Rosemary. We will go into the question and answer period for the remaining 15 minutes that we've got, and then we as panelists have to get out of the room by 2 o'clock. So the webinar will end promptly then as well. We've had a couple questions come in from attendees who are wondering what will happen if somebody doesn't answer a single question on the form. What is the process that happens after that? And so I was wondering, potentially Lily and Natrice, if you could address that question.
Sure. So this is Lily, speaking from the Census Bureau, and knowing that we have, like I looked to Kay, former census employee, demographers who are on the call. The more data we have, the better off we are for the next decade. Data is used in so much of our community planning, in assessing our population and the needs of our communities, especially smaller local communities. This is things that we need to do our everyday work. So with that said, we would seek a complete and accurate count, and a complete data set would be the best. There are discussions around this. What if I don't answer any questions? And we could not be just talking about the citizenship question, we'd be talking about other questions. So here's what I would say. We will have a quality check process. So we do not want to, if you've worked in political environments before, you may have heard this slogan, you submit your ballot, you'll never hear from us again. Please know that we have a quality check and the non-response follow-up. You don't need to memorize all of our acronyms, we have a lot. So NARFU is our non-response follow-up process that will occur, as was discussed on the call today, starting in April, going through July 24th of 2020. You may have someone give you a phone call, and when I say you, I mean anyone throughout the entire country. You may have someone reach back out to you and say, by the way, I noticed that you missed this question. We'd like to make sure that we have good data. And so that is incumbent upon us to do our due diligence in seeking complete data. However, it is up to the individual how they respond to that. So we want to make sure that people don't think if they fill it out that that's the last time they'll ever hear from us.
And to tie a little bit into what Lily said, I talked a little bit in my presentation about the fact that we know that there's a housing unit, so we sent all that information over to the Census Bureau quite some time ago, and we continue to update that information as we know new things are being built and people will be moving into those communities. So with that tracking, we're able to say we know that someone lives at 1313 Sherman. We're just not sure, and we got no response from that particular building. So then there will be follow-up that'll be done. As Lily stated, there are questions about, well, what if I fill out a couple of questions and not all the questions? Or what if I fill out none of the questions? How would you know? And so we also are looking at ways that we make sure that there's not duplication, right? So if we've got duplication efforts happening, the benefit of having all those housing units counted by the state already is knowing that we know that this address needs to have someone fill it out, right? And if multiple people fill it out, then we look at that. And if we also have people that don't fill it out at all, and we know someone lives there, then that's how we communicate and make sure that people are followed up with.
For Kay and Jillian and Rosemary, thinking about communities that might not have the level of resources that Denver has, what do you think could be the best first things to do for smaller communities who are just kind of starting in this process?
In my opinion, probably the Complete Count Committee, whether that's a couple of people that meet over coffee at your local cafe and just strategize about how this is going to work for your small community. But it's just a good way to get folks talking about it as you move forward into 2020.
I agree, and I want to add that the Complete Count Committee model can be used by a school community, a church community, a faith community, or a neighborhood. And it doesn't have to be as elaborate as multiple subcommittees, but a group of concerned citizens that want to gather to promote census participation is a model that can be used at any level.
Kevin, may I add? You can call me. I can help you. We've got
Lily can help everybody.
State, so we're happy to get the ball rolling if it's 2 people gathered at a table or whatever that looks like. We're happy to help.
And then to Lily and Natrice as well. There's been talk in Colorado at the state level, at the legislature level, to bring some monetary resources to bear on this. How can Colorado and/or other states that might be listening in be effective in bringing resources to bear to getting a complete count completed, and what do you think would be the best avenues to do so?
Yeah, I'll touch a little bit on that. So the legislation that Jillian was talking about is asking for $12 million for the state. And so that number could change, it could fluctuate, it's not finalized. The way that other states can look at this is looking at your population. I mean, Colorado being a local control state, it's important for us to get into each community. And so I don't know if everyone else on the call who's outside of the state has those types of resources, but the benefit of having Colorado is that we can have people engage at the local level, and that is the trust source. If you have foundations that would be willing to get behind this effort, and so the foundation dollars that we can try to find, or that you can try to find in your communities, are ways to participate in that. Some of the stuff that we're doing right now, we're not getting any money for it. So the state level, right now, we don't have any dollars designated. So all this work is just by people who are passionate about the work and want to get out to the community. So finding those individuals is important. Foundational support is important as well, but also we're in legislative session. So getting your local legislators behind the effort for the census and having them communicate with different nonprofits that have done the work and done the estimates of what it means per dollar, how many dollars are per person, that would be a good way to get funding in place. Because it is session in most states right now, there's still opportunities to introduce legislation that would request those dollars. You have some states like California who are doing it already, and so, but they're larger, right? So there's more funding sources that they might have. But I would suggest foundations, nonprofits that can get behind it, or any type of legislators that support the effort would be a good way to try to bring the dollars in, or at least get money to support those efforts.
So I would compliment, and I think it's been discussed very well today and in depth, but I don't think it can be overstated, that the trusted messenger in a local community is, you can't count that in dollars. You can't give it a dollar amount on it. It is immeasurable. So as we started up and we started, casting a wide net throughout the entire state, we have our state CCC. We've started in communities like Denver, but we're also hitting northern Colorado, the western slope, San Luis Valley, Eastern Plains, because local communities know who those trusted voices are. And if I came into a community and asked for folks to participate in the 2020 census, does not carry the same message as the promotora showing up at your door and saying, look, in whatever language that looks like, I participated because this is the one thing I can do that takes 10 minutes for us to be represented, be counted, be heard, be a voice in our communities. And I think that trusted messenger voice is the critical nature that we're trying to deliver through the CCCs.
I do have a question to ask. For those who may not know, DRCOG is also the designated area agency on aging. If you're outside the Denver region, every single part of the country is captured by an area agency on aging, and they are required by the federal government to advocate on behalf of older adults. I just like to plug this at any meeting I have, because if you have an older adult relative or loved one who's somehow struggling, call your local AAA and they will have somebody there who is legally responsible for advocating for that person. So with that said, I'm wondering, in the DRCOG region, 1 in 4 people will be an older adult above the age of 60 by 2035. This is a demographic trend that we're seeing across the country. So what sorts of resources, either at the state level or in local communities, are you hoping to see there for older adults, and what might be there at the present moment? So it's kind of open to everybody. So we'll go to Natrice.
I'll start with just kind of what we're doing at the state level. So we've identified Human Services sits on our state complete count committee. So we have a AAA that we work with through Human Services, but also we're going out with groundwork, like guerrilla marketing type aspects, to go to all of the like bingo nights and things like that. And so it's not us saying like this is the best way to do it, but we know that going to someone and saying, oh, we'll go fill this out online, if they're not really keen on the online aspect, we need to go and meet them where they are. So what we've noticed at the state level, and I'm sure Kay will speak to this at the local level, is meeting people where they are is really important. And so we are going to bingo night. We are going to the 1-hour sessions that they have at some of the Senior Resource Center, for example. We go there and we talk about some of the things that could happen and funding programs that are impactful to that particular population, but we also leave materials. And so I think that, as Kay talked about, you have to hear it 7 times before you actually remember it. We have the physical presence, we have the literature that's out there, so if people want to pick it up and read it, but we also are just physically there to have conversations with people, to get questions answered that may not be triggered at the AAA level. Like, we know that they're experts in the area, but little Rosie may have a question that nobody has ever thought about and she wants to know, and then she can pass that information along to her family. So that engagement piece is really what we think is necessary for that group.
Yeah.
So we're, Together We Count, we have to take more of a systems approach because we don't have the resources of a program like the state or the census. So we're going in through groups like Older Adult Technology Services, which is a national organization, which has actually kicked up on our notion that older adults should be considered hard to count by the census. We're working with Senior Hub, and those are technology services because of the emphasis on technology by the census. It's a great opportunity to not only promote census participation, but promote technology participation by that particular population. It's a booming population group in the state, and with our push to older people aging in place, it's essential that we reach their caregivers and their CNAs that help support them through programs like the ones that DRCOG runs.
And I'll put in one quick plug for Denver. So on Friday, Denver Connects launches, which is a mobile van, actual van, that is run by the Office of Older Adults. And it's going to spend time mostly in Denver's communities that are most at risk of gentrification and displacement. And it happens to be also run out of the same agency that I'm housed in. So I'm going to be tucked right in you know, with census information everywhere they go. So at least in Denver, we'll also be on the ground in a literal van.
And I would just close out with the comment that, as I mentioned, there is extreme overlap in some of our outreach efforts. So this is comfortable conflict. This is welcome conflict. So Elizabeth Cyphers, I'm really glad on behalf of the Census, reached out to AARP in Colorado. We have national partnerships at the state level and local level, town level, anywhere level. A state partnership that we garnered is AARP. They have a reach of over 700,000. They have committed to partner with the Census to amplify our message, educate, motivate people to self-respond, and it's a huge partnership for us, for all of us in this room and everyone in Colorado. So won't go into further details, but they are going to amplify our message a lot. And our jobs. Just closing out.
I mean, it may not be known, but a lot of older adults actually take the jobs that are for the Census Bureau because they're temporary and they don't affect Social Security earnings, right?
So that's a long, we'll
that's
cover that later. We'll follow up with Kevin on that. Everybody has questions
with your tax account. But a lot of older folks take these temporary jobs to get out in the community and meet folks and stay active.
So with that, it is 2 o'clock. I do want to provide clarity. I said AAA a lot. I should have also mentioned that that means Area Agency on Aging. They're all over the place. So talk to your older adult friends and family members and, get them employed for the next couple of years, maybe. Help them get their friends and families well involved. So with that, thank you all for listening in today. You'll get kicked out to an evaluation survey. We just asked that you fill that out. And thank you so much for listening in over this lunch hour and a half, and we hope you've gotten a lot out of it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.